Hi people, me again of course as always and as usual, Moino Ravenberg. Yeah, this is going to be a video on a neutral topic, really quick. I'm going to give people career and financial advice based on my own knowledge and experience and whatnot. So yeah, let's dive right in. Um, Point one, regarding jobs or profession, you need to stay in the same field or line of work, thereby making it so that you already have relevant work experience and that you don't have to quote unquote start all over again or start all over from scratch, provided that you acquire a new job and or employer. This speaks for itself, honestly. When you work somewhere, for example, or you go into a line of work, um, it is heavily preferred or it's heavily recommended that you stay in that line of work. So if you work in catering, you work in retail, or you work in anything, manufacturing, etc., or textile manufacturing, you name it, anything, okay? It's recommended you work in law enforcement or the armed forces, anything like that, okay? Any line of work, it's recommended that you stay in that line of work as much as possible rather than simply hypothetically jump from profession to profession, like a monkey jumping from tree branch to tree branch, crudely put. Because what's going to happen is that you're going to turn into a jack of all trades in a manner of speaking, but a master of none. And if you keep doing that, then after like a decade of working, for example, you will find yourself with little to nothing to show for it, because every time you you undertake a new profession, anytime that you actually do something new, okay, you used to be a bartender and now all of a sudden you're a hotel clerk, and then after that you're going to work in a retail store. Yeah, you're gonna have to start from scratch all over again, okay, with all the negativities accompanying it, such as base pay and whatnot. Whereas if you stick to one profession, provided that that's actually what you want to do and or that is what is recommended based on logic and reason from a neutral perspective, don't just focus on what you just want to do, as in, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I love it so much. Sometimes you don't get to do career-wise what you love. You need to also, other than doing what you love, need to focus on, I want to say honestly, first and foremost, you need to focus on what is more practical for you, okay? Which job pays the most, which job is doable for you, as in, you don't have to necessarily love what you do, but you can easily go it the job is of such a nature that you can easily just work through the day without any issues or anything like that. So simply ask yourself, can I do this for the rest of my life? Is it convenient? Can I simply go to work, do my job, and come home? Is it actually moderately nice to work? Excluding the actual profession itself. It's okay if the profession is like meh, but everything else is nice, like your colleagues, those you work with, or clientele, and so on and so forth. Like that. Um, so if you actually have, it goes a long way. If you, for example, you've worked in retail, you were a retail manager, just an example, and then for whatever reason you get laid off and you've worked there for like 2 years, 3 years, then you can see the benefits that accompany something like that. Okay, if you go to another retail store, you won't have to start from scratch because you already have relevant work experience. You already know the ins and outs and vice versa of and how things work in the industry in general. So in most places, most companies are the same at a base level. So that's it. Any kind of things that you have to get used to or things that require work experience will be more of a minor and or customized nature. But for the rest, yeah, you'll already pick the job up a lot quicker because of just that. You have relevant work experience and also the benefits, such as you not starting with base pay or a base salary. It's unlikely. As long as you have proof that you have indeed worked at a prior company that is in the same line of work, then the management as a whole is unlikely to just say, oh, okay, so you're going to start with base pay. No, usually you'll start with the salary or income of someone that's already worked there for a year or two or so. So you can see how it goes a long way. Um, Yeah, and speaking of that, always request an employer statement or similar or equivalent that serves as proof that you actually worked there documentatively, specifically denoting the position you held while employed as well as the amount of time that you worked for said employer. Globally, it doesn't matter what country you live in and or what you do. By default, according to basic labor laws globally, you're supposed to get an employer statement, which is simply obviously a document. Let's just say you get fired somewhere or you're laid off, etc. If they're unwilling to give it to you, you can go to the labor department, honestly, and the labor department will coerce them into giving it to you because it's a basic. I don't know if this is the case literally in every country on earth, but to my knowledge, nah, it's pretty much everywhere. You've worked somewhere, for example, like I said, you worked as a retail manager, you get laid off after 2-3 years. The company you work for is supposed to give you documentative proof. So you need to get something in writing, an official document from the company with their stamp and their logo or signed by the CEO, whatever, that says that, hey, listen, Mr. blah, 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 Mr. Alexander has worked here for 3 years. He was a retail manager, etc., etc. That's it. Okay. Documentative proof that, hey, you were indeed a manager and you worked there for 3 years. Point 3. Provided you have the budget for it, or if at any given moment or time you have some money to spare, or you can afford to save up for a couple of months, take relevant courses relating to your line of work. It boosts your value on the job market as well as overall. Yeah, also self-explanatory. Like if you have the budget for it, then it goes a long way to take a couple of courses that are specifically related to what you do or your line of work, or anything that is even if it's only indirectly related. Again, in the aforementioned example, retail manager, you could take a course in if there is a course available at a consulting company or courses. You don't have to take a gazillion courses, but one or two, they go a long way. For example, how to, I don't know, I'm just going to come up with an example that isn't necessarily applicable to the real world, but you get the gist of it. For example, a course on safety in the workplace, or how to spot theft in the workplace, or anything like that. It's just an example, okay? If you take a course like that, then it adds to your resume. It makes it so that it increases your value as a laborer on the labor market. It increases your value as a worker or employee on the job market, because when you hand in your resume, management will see that, hey, you also have relevant courses. This is also it's not just okay your base qualifications, education, etc. Doesn't matter whether you went all the way to college or not, and then you have relevant work experience. It's also, the relevant work experience counts the heaviest, honestly, based on my own knowledge and experience, but those things also go a long way. Having, for example, qualifications through certifications, in the aforementioned example, they can tell that, management can tell that, oh, okay, yeah, the guy has he took several courses in how to spot theft in the workplace and whatnot. It makes a good impression, and like I said, either way, it literally increases your value overall. Brush up on basic labor laws if you're unfamiliar with them, so that you know what your rights and the related are, at least at a basic level. Yeah, this is something that most people, I notice, that don't have. They don't know what their basic rights are, and let alone more as an employee. It speaks for itself. You need to be knowledgeable on what your rights are, so that the company lest you risk the company that you work for or similar doing with them whatever they want. Because I've seen examples like that, countless examples, in a manner of speaking. If you don't know your rights, then you're going to come off as insecure on the working floor, and it is not going to go over well, because management is more inclined to coerce you into doing things you don't want to do. Simple example is, for example, like lifetimes ago, when I still worked mundane jobs and I worked as a security guard, I saw how all my colleagues were like, not all of my colleagues, but a good deal of them. My colleagues, contrary to me, were a bunch of idiotic hicks. No offense to them, but I don't care. typical country bumpkin, imbecilic type that can barely read and or write properly. I'm being a bit mean here, but I don't care. Then, and I saw as a result or consequence that, for example, at most by default, I knew my rights, and the Labor Department also told me that, hey, in terms of how long you work 12 hours a day, that's the absolute maximum. Like at absolute, by default, you're supposed to work. A company cannot force you to work longer than 12 hours. 8 hours is the base, and then 4 hours is in extremist of cases. Since you already work 12 hours, Mr. Ravenberg, then there is no room for leeway. Because I asked them, I was like, hey, can the company I work for force me to stay longer than 12 hours? Because I saw them do that shit with employees, and they were like, no, 12 hours is the maximum. End of story. I was like, okay, cool. Now I know. Thank you. And yeah, they forced my colleagues, honestly. Imagine working from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then because of the company's fault and their inability to actually find a suitable replacement for you when it's time for someone else to pick up your shift or to pick up the next shift, the company tries to force you to do so, and that's what they did with my colleagues. My colleagues were sometimes forced or coerced into working all the way until 11 p.m. And then, because they didn't know their rights, they were afraid to lose their jobs or similar or face any kind of repercussions whatsoever. They reluctantly agreed to staying until, for example, a replacement was found. And sometimes it lasted all the way up until like 16 hours. So imagine that, 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. And that same employee is supposed to show up back the following morning at 7 a.m. Really, you tell me, have you lost your mind? And these aren't guys that live across the street, so to speak, from where they work, from a location. No. These guys, usually they live very far away. Like, I met guys that lived in the northern part of town, and then the guy worked in the northern part of town, and then the guy lives all the way in the southern part of town. We're talking about the guy who has to take like 2 buses to get to work. And then imagine that, how can someone like possibly get that done? And they tried that stuff with me, but not in a serious manner, because they already knew what time it was with me. But still, I met situations where I simply left, and my supervisor told me, you can't leave that location. There are people that I'm like, I don't care. I'm done. I work my full shift. According to labor laws, I can't work more than 12 hours. And they couldn't say anything. It was like foot and mouth. They literally couldn't say anything. Like, oh, okay. And then even the owner of the location where I stood guard, he told me, hey, I'm sorry, are you leaving? I was like, yeah, I'm already done with my shift. He was like, okay, but, where is the replacement then? I'm like, you need to call the company. You can call the office. I'm done. My shift is over. It's the company's problem. There is no replacement to show up. You know what time it is, Mr. Watkins, for example. You know what time it is, Mr. Watkins. Okay, there is no replacements for the so many a time. But again, that's on the company. I'm done. I work 12 hours. I can't stay longer. He was like, okay, I'll call the office. Yeah, just goes on. Again, it's just pure negligence and whatnot. You know what time it is. I don't have to say anything with these work less than nothing companies. Unfortunately, the majority of companies I work for were work less than nothing, or worthless at least. The typical company where the help wanted sign is always outside, like that, But and it got so bad too, because I put so much pressure on management to the point where they threatened to suspend me. I also, looked around to see exactly how I can accommodate them, the extent to which I can do so without taking anything away from myself, or too much at least. So without too much of an inconvenience, it being too much of an inconvenience for me primarily, and to a lesser extent for everyone involved. But, they seriously tried that. I told them no. I already told you, according to labor laws, I was like, try it. Go ahead, I'm begging you, suspend me. I went to the labor department on these guys, I think a total of 2 to 3 times. And a colleague from a different department told me, hey, Ravenberg, you're public enemy number 1 now, because you went to the labor department on these guys. These guys are really pissed off with you. And yeah, I could tell like the CEO disliked me, etc. because I was essentially like the guy that's putting a lot of pressure on them and lighting a fire up under their asses. But I openly yelled back at my colleague, I don't give a shit. All I care about is my income. That's literally what I did. I don't mess around. I don't care. I'm there for the paycheck. I don't give a crap about the company. The company doesn't deserve any mercy or leniency. That's just an example, personal example, but you get the gist of it, okay? By default, you need to know where you stand as an employee. You need to know what your rights are, as in what are the things that I'm entitled to, and you need to compare, at least basic, brush up on basic labor laws and compare them to the company you work for. Like, try to find out what you want to do for a living or for the rest of your life, and or for the rest of your life, profession-wise or job-wise, preferably before you are around 32 regarding age. You don't want to be stuck in a position where you're already in your mid-30s and then still floating from job to job or in between jobs or working a dead-end job. Let it be noted that there are exceptions to the saying, you're never too old to learn something, or it's never too late, or better late than never still applies. Yeah. There are exceptions, but in general, obviously it's not recommended for example, to be in your 30s, like mid 30s, and then you're still going to like jump from job to job because you don't know exactly what you want to do. I mean, really, do you want to discover your so-called career-based passion at the age of 40 years old? I mean, there are exceptions, but in general, you need to avoid that. It's essentially between the ages of 18 and 25. If you don't know what you're going to do for a living, or just plain nothing interests you to the extent where you're so passionate about it, no, then you need to, by that time, you already need to settle and do what I said in one of the aforementioned points, which is, again, simply don't look at passion so much. Look at what is convenient compared to your own life personally as well as overall, and what is doable, as in, I mean, very few people are passionate about like retail, as in, oh, it's my dream to manage a clothing store for the rest of my life. No. Or to supervise a clothing store. Yeah. No, of course not. No one dreams of stuff like that in general. Let alone anything below that, like a cashier or anything like that. No offense meant to anyone that does like blue collar work or anything. But again, you need to look at not so much at passion, as in, is it convenient? Do you enjoy the overall atmosphere of working in such an environment? Can you do your job well and then go home, etc.? It needs to not be a drag, as in, to the point where you're going to work with lead in your shoes, in a manner of speaking. You need to actually enjoy what you do, not so much the line of work you're in or what you do at a base level, but everything that is within a metaphorical or literal vicinity. Do you enjoy the job in the sense of, are your employees pleasant? Is the atmosphere, the ambience and environment pleasant to be in? If so, then yeah, I mean, why not? You need to know already between the ages of 18 and 25. Otherwise, if, again, you don't want to be around 30 years old, let alone older, and then still think of, hey, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? Because you essentially stop being seen as an employee with potential after you hit 40, honestly. Because between 40, you've got after 40, you've only got 2 decades to go before you hit retirement age. So how do you want to retire when you don't even know, what you want to do effectively? You're simply going to retire not really having any serious work experience in any line or field of work. So again, between 18 and 25, you need to already know what you're going to do, as in, hey, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and it's convenient, and follow all the other outline points that I mentioned since the beginning of this video. Again, there are exceptions, okay? I mean, if for whatever reason, better late than never, you're 45 years old or 50 even, and you discover your true passion, like, hey, I always wanted to let me see, what example can I come up with? I always wanted to become a programmer or coder, but you simply never got around to it due to exceptional life circumstances, for example, of a personal nature. Then yeah, better late than never, as long as on paper it's still better compared to what you would have done per my recommendation. like I said earlier, like between 18 and 25, you settled for a job or for a line of work, then yeah, sure, no problem. But those are exceptions. Like I said, those are exceptions. Again, and that's pretty much it. But before I close off this video, what's important in all of this is that you. What's important in all of this is that you you go about this in a logic and rational manner. Like I said, don't just follow your passion and just say, oh, I love doing this, so I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, etc. Because usually, or in general, more often than not, at the very least, like 7 out of 10 times or 6 out of 10 times, people's passions don't line up with what they're actually good at and what would be the best for them in terms of line of work, field of work, you name it. Okay, so you need to compare that, as in, hey, if I follow my passion, you know, what's going to happen, what's going to go down. And if I, for example, do the sensible thing, what's going to happen? Usually the latter is what matters the most. Think of the dreamer that dreamed of being an actor or an actress. Remember, I don't know if people remember this, but back in the day, for example, in the early 90s or the 80s, you had a bunch of, like, they called it Hollywood fever, if I'm not mistaken. You had a bunch of girls that, like, went off to Hollywood because they had dreams of making it big, becoming the next Meryl Streep or some shit, no offense. You know, and what happened? All of them, like, and that, how many out of all of those girls, like 100 girls and their women, how many of them actually made it? Exactly. That's my point. You see what happens? Now, you can be passionate about something, but logic and reason still dictates the world, as it will always. You need to do the first, the former, and then passion comes. It's great if both align, then yeah, maybe you're meant for it. In my case, for example, with me, it all fits. From a logical, neutral perspective, what I do is literally what I am meant and or destined for to do. Literally, like, I have no other skill sets. This is what I do. This is who I am. And it also aligns with my passion. But it's not even a passion. It's like so far past that it's not even applicable verbally, honestly. I can't even pronounce it, or I can't even define it. Honestly, it's not even a passion. This is literally down to the very core of my being, who I am. So for me, it all aligns perfectly. So yeah. But for the average person, like I said, you need to use logic and reason. Okay. Again, the actor's example is a perfect example. You need to look at everything. Like, look at the competition. Look at everything. Okay. There are, if you think you're thinking about that, there are plenty of other girls that are, or women that are more talented than you. Simply look at the odds. What are your chances of actually making it? You can pursue that as long as you see that you realistically stand a good chance despite all the odds. But in the meantime, you need to also work or engage in a line of work that is more practical and that you can fall back on. But don't be stupid to the point where you're starstruck and you're going to say, oh yeah, maybe I'm going to make it, etc. Yeah, no, most of people like that, they're delusional, honestly. And it just goes on. Yeah, before I go again, one last example I'm going to give as well is that I think a good while ago, I saw a documentary about African football players in Europe, football, soccer for Americans. Okay, I saw a documentary about like a year or two ago about African football players. They get contracts to go to Europe, they're scouted, etc. And then only a handful out of the thousands of guys that go, only these guys actually make it into the big leagues, and the rest is they're just dumped by clubs in Europe, professional football clubs. And then these guys are destitute. They have nowhere to go. The club doesn't even give them a plane ticket back home in general, as far as I know. To the point where the guy that they interviewed in the documentary, he actually built a thingy. I mean, he established some kind of club or establishment for destitute football players. So essentially, a guy in that position, and he established a thingy, some kind of club or a union for players just like him, discarded players. And that's my point. And I told someone, you see what I'm talking about? When this subject miscellaneously came up, I'm like, when you see, for example, these guys on camera, you see them on the big screen, whether it's an actor or a famous athlete or otherwise, these guys are literally like a handful. Only one or two of these guys really make it to the point where you see them on the big screen. They make it to the big leagues, and then they make a lot of money and all the benefits that accompany being someone like that, being like a celebrity. For every one of these guys you see, there are like at least 100 guys that failed. They don't make it, and what are they then? And what do they do then? You see my point? These guys follow their passion, yeah, but what? It's delusional to think that, oh, I'm going to become a big football star, I'm going to become a big athlete star, or a famous actor or actress. And no, you need to use your head for a second, okay? And you need to have a backup plan. What is more practical to do? What can you do for work at a mundane level, at the very least, until your career takes off, if it provided it does it all. Like I said, don't be delusional. You need to look at everything, like the odds, etc. It just goes on. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in such a position. Now you're destitute, etc. The years go by, and before you know it, oh look, I'm 40 years old, and you don't have anything solid to fall back on profession-wise that can earn you a good paycheck. That's all, guys. Bye bye.